Before a man can build his life with strength, before he can conquer distraction, laziness, or despair, he must understand the very engine that drives him forward. That engine is not wealth, not recognition, not even willpower alone. It is the chemistry of motivation placed within him, the sacred spark known as dopamine. When the first rays of morning light touch the earth, they are not just beams of brightness. They are carriers of life, of energy, of divine force that awakens both body and spirit. Within that golden light is the power to ignite a fire in the human soul, a fire that transforms weakness into strength and doubt into unshakable belief. Ancient traditions have long instructed mankind to rise with the sun, to greet the dawn, to bow before the light as one bows before the Creator. It was never just ritual. It was a way to align human beings with the very rhythm of nature and the divine order itself. Science today reveals what sages knew intuitively. Morning sunlight sets the clock of the body. It raises dopamine levels. It awakens drive, focus, and purpose. Without this light, the mind sinks into heaviness, but with it the spirit soars. Think of the sacred act of facing the rising sun. It is not simply looking at a celestial body, it is looking at the eternal reminder that darkness is temporary, that after every long night comes a blazing call to rise again. When the eyes receive that light, tiny cells send messages deep into the brain. The brain responds by releasing chemicals, among them dopamine, which fills us with a sense of motivation and clarity. This is not a fleeting rush. This is the setting of the baseline, the background current of energy that carries us through the day. Religion speaks of it as divine blessing. Science names it biological regulation. But both are voices telling us the same truth. Without the dawn, man drifts. With the dawn, he is restored. Imagine the one who misses this call, who turns away from the morning, who sleeps while the sky burns with gold. Such a person finds the day heavy, tasks unbearable, energy absent. He searches for strength and stimulants, distractions, illusions, yet remains hollow because he has ignored the very gift freely given to him by the Creator each morning. To neglect the sunrise is to neglect the covenant of life itself. Spiritual texts describe it as choosing darkness over light, ignorance over knowledge. Neuroscience describes it as failing to set the dopamine rhythm. Two languages, one truth. The prophets and saints of old did not speak idly when they taught humanity to rise before the sun, to cleanse, to pray, to lift their eyes to the heavens. They knew that in those early moments, when the veil of night is lifted, the soul is most open to divine energy. Standing in that light is a purification, a renewal. The shivers of cold air, the silence of dawn, the brilliance of first light, all of it converges to awaken something eternal inside us. As the rays strike the skin and the eyes, the body itself is instructed: awaken, prepare, create, act. It is not merely the start of a day, it is the anointing of the soul with power. When we think of dopamine, too often it is linked to fleeting pleasures, quick highs, shallow rewards. But true power lies not in spikes of dopamine, but in the steady elevation of the baseline, the background hum of motivation that keeps us disciplined, consistent, and faithful to our calling. Morning light is the most natural, the most divine method to raise this baseline. It does not exhaust, it does not deplete, it sustains. That is why ancient texts spoke of the rising sun as nourishment for the soul. It was always more than warmth or brightness. It was the invisible food that feeds both the spirit and the brain. Consider the symbolism. The sun rises without fail, no matter how deep the darkness, no matter how long the night. It is the ultimate act of faithfulness, and when you stand in that light, you are reminded that you too must rise daily. You too must shine upon the world with strength and constancy. This is why saints bathed in the light, why scriptures sang hymns to the sun, why seekers lifted their hands to the sky. They were not worshiping a star, they were recognizing the hand of God moving through creation. And by aligning themselves with it, they aligned with order, with rhythm, with unshakable power. The body is not separate from the soul. When light enters the eyes, it is as if revelation enters the spirit. Science calls it activation of the suprachiasmatic nucleus, hormones shifting, dopamine rising. Religion calls it grace, blessing, enlightenment. Different words, same miracle. The one who greets the sun greets destiny itself. The one who ignores it sinks deeper into shadow. Each dawn is an invitation, and only the disciplined accept it. The greatest battles of life are not fought with swords but with spirit, and spirit draws its strength from order, from light, from discipline. Morning light is the daily sacrament given to mankind, the natural ignition of the fire within. To step outside, to face the east, to let the glow wash over you. It is a prayer in motion, a pact with creation itself. In that moment, you are not just a body in sunlight, you are a vessel filling with divine current. You are being charged with endurance, focus, resilience. Your baseline is being raised not only in chemistry, but in character. Those who ignore this sacred rhythm stumble through life with heavy hearts and restless minds, constantly seeking, never satisfied. Those who embrace it walk with clarity, purpose, and drive, carrying a light within them that cannot be extinguished by circumstance. Morning light is the breath of the heavens. It is the whisper of the divine into the ear of man. It is the awakening of the brain's chemistry into harmony with the soul's calling. When cold water strikes the skin, it feels like a shock, as though the body is being tested by creation itself. But hidden inside that shock is a profound gift. The cold is not punishment, it is purification. For centuries, saints, ascetics, And seekers have stepped into icy rivers before the rising sun, not to torture themselves, but to awaken a strength far deeper than comfort can ever give. They knew what science now confirms: exposure to cold triggers the nervous system, floods the body with energy, and elevates dopamine to levels that remain high for hours. This is not a shallow spike, but a powerful surge that sets the baseline higher, giving clarity of mind, resilience of spirit, and unshakable drive to face the day. The body trembles, the breath quickens, the heart pounds, and in that moment of discomfort, the mind is forced into the present. There is no past, no future, only now, only survival, only awareness. This sharpened state is not weakness, but awakening. Religious texts describe it as cleansing, washing away the impurities of body and soul. Science describes it as activation of pathways in the brain that fuel focus, determination, and endurance. Two voices, one truth. To step into the cold is to step into transformation. Cold water is a mirror. It shows you whether you choose comfort or courage, whether you cling to the warmth of safety or embrace the fire that lies hidden within discomfort. Every splash, every immersion is an act of defiance against laziness, against fear, against weakness. Saints called it tapasya, a discipline that burns away the old self and reveals the new. Neuroscience calls it a sustained rise in dopamine, the very molecule of motivation. Both describe the same reality: cold awakens power. When you let cold water cover you, the first instinct is to escape, to retreat, to return to comfort. But if you stay, if you breathe, if you surrender to the experience, a shift happens. The body adapts, the mind steadies, and a deep strength rises from within. The trembling stops, not because the cold has left, but because you have grown stronger than the cold. In that moment, you realize that resilience is not given. It is earned through struggle, through exposure, through facing what you fear. Think of the pilgrim who steps into a freezing river before sunrise, chanting prayers as the water bites into the skin. That act is not symbolic alone. It is chemical. It is spiritual. It is transformational. The cold strips away distraction and doubt, leaving behind only faith and fire. Science reveals that dopamine released in such moments can remain elevated for hours, fueling focus and drive long after the water has dried. The pilgrim leaves the river not just cleansed but empowered, not just faithful but fortified. Life is filled with challenges that feel like icy waters, sudden, harsh, unavoidable. To practice cold exposure is to train the soul for those moments, to rehearse the act of meeting discomfort with courage. Religion frames it as purification. Science frames it as neurochemical resilience, but both lead to the same destination: a self that is unbreakable. The cold teaches that pain is temporary, but the strength it awakens is eternal. In the stillness after the shock, when breath calms and heart steadies, there is a profound awareness: I endured, I overcame, I rose above. That awareness is not only emotional, it is chemical. The elevated dopamine hums like a current beneath the surface, steadying the mind, energizing the body, sharpening the will. It is the same current that saints spoke of when they described the glow of tapasya, the radiance of one who has embraced hardship. It is the same current scientists describe when they measure motivation and drive after cold exposure. Different words, one truth. The cold is a teacher, and its lesson is power. A simple cup placed before you, steam rising, aroma filling the air. To many it seems ordinary, but within that dark liquid lies one of the most powerful tools for sharpening the mind and igniting the will. Caffeine, when approached with wisdom, is not merely a stimulant, it is a way to enhance the very system that drives human motivation. Science explains that caffeine binds to adenosine receptors, holding back the tide of fatigue. But beyond that, it amplifies the signaling of dopamine, not in the fleeting, destructive way of artificial pleasures, but in a manner that heightens focus, alertness, and clarity when timed with discipline. Religion and ancient tradition have always revered mindful consumption, whether it was tea offered in monasteries at dawn or bitter brews shared by seekers before meditation. It was never about indulgence, but about sharpening the vessel of the soul for work, study, prayer, and creation. The body is a sacred temple, and what enters it either weakens or strengthens its fire. Caffeine, when consumed recklessly, becomes a chain, a dependency that exhausts the spirit. But when used with discipline, it becomes like the sword of a warrior, sharp, precise, purposeful. Taken in the early hours, after the light of the sun has set the body's rhythm, caffeine lifts the mind into a state of readiness. It makes the difficult task approachable, the long study bearable, the focused prayer unwavering. It does not create motivation out of nothing, but it amplifies the natural flame already lit by morning light and inner discipline. The danger lies not in the gift itself, but in misuse. Just as sacred fire can illuminate or consume, caffeine can uplift or enslave. Those who run to it at every moment of tiredness, who consume it in excess, find that their baseline begins to falter. The dopamine system, instead of standing strong, becomes dulled, exhausted, unresponsive. The spiritual lesson is clear: moderation is strength, discipline is freedom. The scientific truth is the same: strategic use sustains, overuse destroys. Picture the monk rising at dawn, taking a single cup of tea before beginning hours of prayer and study. That small dose was not a craving but a tool, a companion in the pursuit of higher purpose. Picture the scholar who drinks his coffee after sunlight exposure, allowing the natural rise of cortisol and dopamine to align with the gentle lift of caffeine. These are not habits of indulgence, They are rituals of mastery. They teach the soul to use the gifts of creation wisely, to harness them for growth rather than slavery. Caffeine taken at the right time becomes a form of devotion, a statement that every tool shall serve purpose and not pleasure alone. It sharpens the edges of thought, deepens the well of focus, and carries the body and mind through the labor that life demands. But it is only powerful when it is not abused. Just as fasting strengthens the soul by reminding it that food is not the master, disciplined use of caffeine reminds the spirit that comfort is not the goal, clarity is. The chemical truth is profound. Caffeine enhances dopamine transmission in the brain's pathways of motivation, but unlike unhealthy excesses, it does not flood the system or crash it down. It lifts gently, it supports, it sustains. Religious truth mirrors this. Use gifts with intention, never with greed. For what is taken with mindfulness becomes sacred, and what is taken with excess becomes poison. When you lift that cup, you are not just drinking a beverage, you are making a choice between indulgence and intention, between scattering your energy or sharpening it. The wise choose to drink when the body is ready, when the mind needs clarity, when the spirit seeks fuel for purpose. The unwise drink without measure, seeking in the cup what can only be found in discipline and light. To use caffeine with strategy is to honor both body and soul. It is to align natural rhythms with divine gifts, to take what the Creator has placed in nature and turn it into a tool of perseverance. The cup then ceases to be ordinary. It becomes a symbol of mastery, of balance, of discipline. Science describes the heightened dopamine, the sharpened focus. Religion describes the sanctification of even small acts when done with awareness and devotion. Both describe the same reality. The right use of what is given brings power, clarity, and drive. Imagine a flame meant to guide your path, burning steadily, illuminating the road ahead. Now imagine pouring oil onto it constantly, again and again, until it grows uncontrollable, chaotic, and then finally collapses into ashes. That is what happens when the gift of dopamine is abused through overstimulation. The world today offers endless sparks, glowing screens, constant notifications, processed foods designed to hijack cravings, endless streams of entertainment, instant pleasures at every corner. Each of these triggers floods of dopamine, not in the steady rhythm of creation, but in a destructive cascade that leaves the spirit empty and restless. The soul was not designed to live in constant indulgence. It was designed to strive, to struggle, to seek meaning beyond comfort. When you give in to every temptation, when every idle moment is filled with scrolling, noise, and shallow rewards, the baseline of dopamine, the quiet river that sustains true motivation, begins to run dry. What once felt joyful now feels dull. What once inspired now feels empty. This is not just science, it is a spiritual truth echoed across time. Excess weakens, discipline strengthens. To overstimulate the mind with constant pleasure is to starve the heart of purpose. Scripture and tradition have always warned against excess. The body is not to be drowned in indulgence, but guided with restraint. Just as fasting purifies the heart and teaches the soul mastery over desire, limiting the constant barrage of artificial pleasures restores balance to the brain. Neuroscience reveals what religion has long taught, that overstimulation desensitizes receptors, numbs the system, and leaves one in need of stronger and stronger doses for lesser and lesser satisfaction. It is the same with gluttony, the same with lust, the same with greed. The more you chase empty pleasures, the more hollow you become. True strength is not in saying yes to every craving, but in having the will to say no, to close the screen, to walk away from the endless pull of distraction, to resist the processed sugar that promises joy but delivers fatigue. Is not denial, it is liberation. Each act of restraint is an act of worship, a reminder that you are not a slave to your biology, but a steward of it. The science of dopamine explains the mechanism, but faith gives it meaning. When you avoid overstimulation, you protect the very fire that fuels your drive, your prayer, your work, your service. Think of the seeker who rises before dawn, not reaching for his phone, not flooding his mind with noise, but sitting in silence, letting the morning light awaken his senses naturally. His baseline remains steady. His motivation rooted not in shallow novelty, but in deep connection. Contrast this with the restless soul who begins the day with endless scrolling, whose dopamine is spiked and crashed before even leaving the bed. One begins with strength, the other with weakness. One honors the temple of the body, the other burns its walls down with indulgence. The discipline of avoiding overstimulation is not about deprivation, it is about preservation. Preservation of energy, focus, clarity, and devotion. Every time you resist the lure of false pleasure, you make room for true joy. Every time you turn from the shallow hit of dopamine, you strengthen your ability to find fulfillment in what is lasting. Science confirms that spacing out dopamine released through discipline restores sensitivity, while religion confirms that patience and restraint bring peace to the soul. Both are paths to the same truth, that life is not about endless consumption, but about purposeful living. The overstimulated brain is like a child spoiled with endless gifts, no longer grateful, no longer content. The disciplined brain is like a servant of God, steady, grateful, finding meaning in simple blessings. By avoiding overstimulation, you allow gratitude to return. You allow simple joys to shine again. You allow your heart and mind to be free of chains. The body was not created for stillness. It was designed to move, to strive, to labor, to bow, to rise, to walk upon the earth with purpose. When the body is idle, the spirit grows restless, the mind grows clouded, and the fire of motivation dims. But when the body is put into motion, when sweat pours, when muscles strain, when breath deepens, something remarkable happens. The baseline of dopamine begins to rise, not in the unstable spikes of artificial pleasures, but in the steady, enduring way that builds resilience and drive. Science confirms what faith has long taught: movement is medicine, discipline in the body is discipline in the soul. Every step taken in exertion, every weight lifted, every lap run is more than just a physical act. It is a declaration of strength against weakness, of order against chaos. Physical exercise signals to the nervous system that life is being pursued with vigor, that goals are being chased, that the vessel of flesh is serving its purpose. The dopamine pathways, sensing this effort, respond by increasing their baseline, ensuring that motivation is not fleeting but sustainable. The brain learns through the body that struggle is rewarding, that endurance brings fulfillment, that effort itself is sacred. Consider the timeless rituals of prayer that demand movement: bowing, standing, prostrating, rising again. These are not empty gestures. They are forms of exercise woven into devotion, uniting the body with the spirit. They teach that movement purifies the mind, awakens the heart, and strengthens the will. In the same way, intentional exercise, running under the sky, lifting burdens, pushing the body to its limit, becomes a form of worship when done with the right heart. It honors the Creator by honoring the creation of the body, by refusing to let it wither in idleness. The lazy path whispers comfort, but it leads to decay. Muscles weaken, bones soften, the mind grows heavy, and dopamine falters. The disciplined path demands effort, even pain, but it forges resilience. It teaches the soul to endure, to overcome, to rise again when exhausted. Neuroscience shows that exercise not only elevates dopamine in the moment, but it trains the brain to sustain higher levels over time, creating a natural fuel for motivation. Spiritual truth mirrors this. Effort brings blessings, struggle brings growth, patience and exertion leads to reward. Think of the warrior who trains daily, not because it is easy, but because it is necessary. His strength is not only in his arms, but in his mind, sharpened by discipline. Think of the seeker who pushes his body, not for vanity, but for vitality, so he can pray with focus, serve with energy, live with purpose. Each drop of sweat is like a prayer in motion, each moment of exertion a reminder that this body is not yours to waste. It is entrusted to you to preserve, strengthen, and use for good. When you exercise, you do more than build muscle or burn calories. You signal to the deepest part of your being that you are alive, that you are capable, that you will not surrender to weakness. The dopamine that rises within is not a trick of pleasure, but a steady power, a reminder that perseverance is rewarded both biologically and spiritually. It becomes easier to face challenges, easier to resist temptations, easier to continue the path of discipline. The science speaks of neurochemicals, of receptors and pathways, of baseline and peaks. The sacred teachings speak of struggle, of striving, of patience, of reward. But both speak of the same truth. Movement is life, idleness is death. To exercise is to align with the design placed within you, a design meant for strength, endurance, and growth. To ignore it is to betray that design. When the body moves with purpose, the spirit follows with fire, and the mind is lit with clarity. When the sun sets and darkness spreads, creation itself whispers to the body rest. Sleep is not idleness, it is renewal. It is the furnace where the mind is cleansed, the spirit is strengthened, and the body is repaired. Without it, the fire of motivation flickers weakly, the heart grows impatient, and the will collapses under the weight of exhaustion. Science shows that deep, quality sleep restores dopamine receptor sensitivity, ensuring that the brain can respond with clarity and drive when daylight comes again. Religion shows us the same truth. Night was created for rest, for surrender, for the humility of closing one's eyes and entrusting one's soul to the one who holds it until morning. When you neglect sleep, when you trade it for endless noise, distraction, or labor without balance, you are not buying time, you are stealing it from tomorrow. The brain deprived of rest cannot respond to dopamine signals properly, leaving you unmotivated, irritable, and blind to purpose. The spirit, deprived of stillness, cannot rise in prayer with presence, cannot seek truth with patience, cannot love with fullness. Just as fasting restores balance by teaching the soul mastery over hunger, sleep restores balance by teaching the soul surrender to divine rhythm. To sleep with intention is not weakness. It is obedience to the very design written into your biology. Consider how even in sacred traditions, the cycles of night and day are honored. The early hours before sunrise are set aside for prayer because they follow renewal, because the body and mind freshly awakened can devote themselves with strength. The discipline of rising early is only possible when the discipline of resting well is respected. To ignore this is to fight against the law of creation, to demand fire from a lamp whose oil has been drained. Neuroscience explains the mechanism. Without proper sleep, dopamine receptors downregulate, meaning even if dopamine is released, the brain cannot use it fully. The result is emptiness, lack of motivation, despair. But with quality sleep, receptors are reset, baseline is restored, and motivation flows again like a river unblocked. The body is not a machine to be run endlessly. It is a trust, a vessel given for a short time. Sleep is the nightly prayer of the body, the daily reminder that you are dependent, that strength is not self-created but restored through grace. To lie down in peace, free of constant stimulation, free of glowing screens and restless habits, is to honor that gift. To wake after such sleep is to rise in clarity, with dopamine systems primed, with energy ready for labor, with heart ready for worship. Every act of discipline around sleep, dimming lights as night falls, avoiding the false fire of screens, embracing silence, waking with the sun, is both a biological tool and a spiritual act. It honors the natural rhythm, the circadian law written by the Creator into every cell. Those who guard their sleep guard their motivation. Those who neglect it stumble through life as if in darkness, no matter how brightly the world shines around them. Science and faith, once again, align. Sleep is not wasted time. It is sacred time. It is the unseen work that makes all seen work possible. It is the preparation that strengthens prayer, study, labor, and service. It is the nightly restoration of dopamine, the resetting of receptors, the renewal of discipline. When sleep is pure, the day is powerful. When sleep is neglected, the day is weak.